welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. Today on the show, I have David Kopp. David is a former LSAT Demon student and current LSAT Demon staffer. How you doing, David?
Good, Nathan. How are you?
Excellent. You mentioned service to school. We just had a guest from service to school, Nathan. What's his last name again?
Lowry.
Nathan Lowry, yeah, was a guest on the Thinking LSAT podcast. And since you actually used service to school yourself, you have some comments about that exact experience?
Yes, they were extremely pivotal in helping me make my transition on my way out of active duty in the Marine Corps. One of their most greatest things was their JD guidebook, which is about a 60-page PDF that translated everything in the application process, and how I would best be able to use my military experiences to then translate that into the application.
Do we
So
have
they
a
had
copy of that?
Yes, I can provide that.
That actually sounds super useful to like everybody because
Oh,
obviously everybody listening does not have a military background, but the just I would imagine to see what these things look like when you translate, like, okay, well, if you're a military person, here's how you would answer this question. I think then a college athlete could use a similar translation, or somebody who interned at some fancy law firm could translate. Yeah. Am I
yes.
wrong?
And no, 100%. And one of the
Okay.
other things that I'm sure you'd really appreciate is they really hit on the financial impact of schools. And so they kind of go back and forth between prices and, if you have benefits, yes, the school might be cheaper based off their offer, but in the long term, it isn't. So when I first started my application, I didn't really know anyone applying to law school at that moment. So I didn't have any like friends or close acquaintances to kind of lean on to help myself out. So I read that the JD guidebook, probably about 3 or 4 times back to front. And so then after that, I got assigned an ambassador who then helped me with application materials, helped me on school choice, etc. Went through my resume. Hey, here's how you can, translate this experience into a little bit better civilian terms, so that way it's not so much military jargon, personal statement, etc. So really kind of from the very beginning of application to acceptance, they were there the entire time, helped me out when, I needed someone to talk to about the applications, and then kind of just gave me someone to walk me through the process.
So you're starting law school this fall?
Yes, that's correct.
Where?
University of Texas in Austin.
Very nice.
Yes.
Congratulations on that. And you're a satisfied service to school user?
1000%, yes. And 1000% satisfied LSAT Demon user.
So talk about your, I mean, we're not, don't have you on to just like brag about the Demon, but I think listeners will appreciate your like journey. So where did you start with LSAT, and then where did you finish? How did it go along the way?
Yes. So let's see. I started my application process probably about December of, what would that be, 2019. So kind of almost a year and a half between the start of my application process to actually picking the University of Texas about a month ago. So the first thing I found was I literally just Googled LSAT preparation companies, and the Thinking LSAT podcast was one of the like top Google result search.
Okay.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. I love listening to podcasts. This is something I can do while I drive back and forth from work. So I listened to you guys for about 2 months. So December, January. And then that was when LSAT Demon started to come online. And I was starting to look into LSAT prep so I could apply in that fall. So it gave me like about a 9-month window before. So I started out with the free trial, absolutely loved it. The greatest thing for me was it was so flexible. I could study before I went to work. When I got lunch for 30 minutes, I could drill a couple questions, and I could come in at night. I didn't have to worry about making a strict class timeline. And with my schedule, being in the Marine Corps, I couldn't count on being available during certain times. So I absolutely love that flexibility. And then soon after that, that's when Demon Live came out. I was kind of like one of the initial cohorts of that. So I absolutely loved it. I took a diagnostic test when I first started with the Demon. That was like one of the first things I did. So I started out with a 151 in January. and progress at the beginning was pretty rapid and pretty fast, which was nice. Within about 2 weeks, I hit 155, and then about a month in, I hit 160 for the first time. So preparation was going well all summer. I signed up for my first test in July. I was feeling pretty confident. I was starting to hit in the mid 160s by that point, and I was feeling good. But when the test came around, I did not have a good experience the first time around. To be quite frank, I froze on the second game, and the game section was the first one. And so it threw me for a loop. I did not do very well on that test. I actually scored a 162, which was lower than my, practice test scores at the time. And so I realized at that point that like I was not going to let games get me again.
Good.
So I know I heard from someone else that, if you're that serious about games, then you just need to be doing games every single day. So
Yep.
I took that to heart. I started drilling games every day during my lunch hour. I blocked off an hour to eat. I just ate while I did games. And so pretty soon I was starting to see real improvement on my games. And then right before my August LSAT, I actually I got my first perfect game section, which was absolutely, huge to me. August LSAT rolls around, did much better, but I still didn't get what I wanted to. I talked to you and Ben, hey, I'm hitting below my practice scores. Should I just take it and apply right now, or should I give it another shot? And both of you guys advised, hey, you're scoring higher than what you got on this last one, so keep on pushing. And so I signed up for the next LSAT, and I was really, really determined to not mess up on games because I wanted a perfect on games. And so at that point, I started doing actually a section of logic games a day. I was hitting really well on LR and RC, but I just want to make sure that when the games came up during my next test, there was no hesitation, nothing like
One
that.
section a day.
One section a
Yeah,
day.
I really like that. For people who have a weakness in games, it is about timed sections. You got to get comfortable with the ticking clock, but I'm not really racing the clock. I'm just going to confidently, carefully solve game one and get all those questions. And then I'm going to do the same thing for game two and the same thing for game three. And hopefully I'm going to finish, but I'm going to for sure get every question that I attempt right. And how was your record on those daily sections? Did you get to a point where you were perfect every day, most days?
Yeah, so probably about after 2 weeks of doing that, I was getting perfect almost every single time. Sometimes I get -1 on the rule substitution games, but for the most part, I was handling the games themselves very well. I was finishing with a little bit of extra time, 1 or 2 minutes. So I was feeling really, really great going into that final LSAT.
Okay. How'd that
And
go?
then it went absolutely amazing. I started off with a game section, and I was super pumped about that because I knew how well I could do on it. And I actually finished that game section on my final official LSAT with 8 minutes left.
Nice.
Because when I got to the games, at that point, I had done every single game in LSAT history. And so it was almost like muscle memory for me. I saw a game and I could remember doing a game very similar to that. Like, oh, I think that was from a test in the 60s. I went to game two. I was like, oh, I just did this 2 weeks ago, a very similar game. And so I almost didn't really need to even think about how to process the games because I put in the work to just instantly recognize the patterns that they put in games.
To be clear, those were not games that you had actually done before. Those were games that hadn't been released, and they're not practice test games, but they just don't change this. They just don't change it very much. Like they have a decent wide, spectrum of different types of operations that you end up doing on the test. But you had done every logic game that's available to practice, right? Like a
Yes.
lawyer would. You did all of the preparation over the weeks and months leading up to your final official test. And eventually it paid off. It just always does. If you do all the work like you did, then it's not surprising that you finish the section and have 8 minutes remaining. It used to be your weakest section. You choked on it on your first official LSAT, and it turns out to be Not only perfect, but perfect plus you get an 8-minute nap. I mean, did you double
Yes.
check your answers during that 8 minutes?
Yes, during once I finished, I went back to the rule substitution questions because I think there was actually two of them in this one.
Okay.
And since those had been the ones I would maybe miss, I went and just reworked those to make sure I did that. I went really slow and I still had like 4 minutes. And so at that point, like I just did breathing exercises for 4 minutes.
Nice.
I was
Yeah, I
like,
love that. I'm glad you didn't like frantically double check all your answers for the remaining 4 minutes, because the truth is you had gotten good enough at the games. You're used to running the table. You're used to, you're just not answering questions until you've gotten them right.
mhm,
So there was no point really in you double, triple checking things. It's much better
yeah.
to use that time to just, yeah, focus, relax, meditate.
And
Beautiful.
so from start to finish, 151, my final official LSAT was a 172. So 21 point improvement. And then from the game section, worst to first, my first diagnostic test, I got 4 questions right on the game section.
Huh.
And then I know for a fact I got a perfect on that game section to get my 172.
Yep.
So the LSAT Demon was great for me because it was flexible. It allowed me to schedule when I wanted to, and it allowed that kind of good repetition that I needed to get that perfect score.
So you still had attempts remaining, but you decided to declare victory with your 172 and just stop there?
Yes, I did that because at that point my average was a 171, and the only time I had scored higher than a 172 was a 175 at one point. So by that time I decided, you know what, I think I've kind of topped out here. I'm fine with my score with my GPA. I've hit my target score, because one of the other things for me was I don't won't have education benefits. I know for a lot of military members, they'll be able to use their education benefits to use that for school, so they don't have to worry about not paying for law school because they've already got that taken care of. I didn't have that available, so I knew how important my LSAT score was, which is why I kept on pushing through even past the disappointing scores, because I was 100% counting on that merit scholarship aid to kind of meet that don't pay for law school mantra that I'd learned from you guys.
And you ended up getting the full ride to UT?
So I got an almost full ride, but with money that I've saved up the past 3 years while at my current duty station, I will be able to graduate debt free from law school, which is, an absolutely amazing, because I started with a 151 and a top 20 school like UT was, not even within, maybe I could get waitlisted there. That's not even possible. But by the end of it and everything with the demon and service to school, I went from 151 to 172 with being able to graduate from a top 20 law school without any debt.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Hope you enjoy Austin. You deserve everything, David. You did the work. I mean, Ben and I are super lucky to just explain a test that makes perfect sense to people until it makes perfect sense to them. By the time you took the test, seems like it was making pretty much perfect sense to you. And you ended up with a 98th percentile score and
Mm-hmm.
a top law school for basically free. Yeah, you did the work. So, you know, that's that's what happens. By the way, buckle up for 3 years of really hard work in law school. I'm
Yes.
sure you're already talking to Matt and Becca and all of
Mm-hmm.
our other people who are in law school
Yeah.
um, about the 8 hours straight reading marathons and stuff that they've they've been
Yes.
doing.
The advice I've been given so far is like, don't try to read any books, don't do any prep courses, just read. Find books that you like to read for fun and just get to used to spending and keep on trying to up that per day reading amount. So that's
Yeah,
that's the general advice I've gotten.
my lawyer friends are, for one, they were people who like to read to begin with, and I think they similarly have it. I've heard them say, yeah, you should probably read for pleasure before law school starts. One, because reading for pleasure just exercises your reading muscle, and two, because it might be the last time you get to read for pleasure for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
um, Once you're in school, you're probably going to be only hitting the
Yes.
books.
Yes.
All right. David Kopp is a Marine and an about to be a UT Austin law student, and he is one of our staffers at lsatdemon.com. Thanks, David, for coming on. If you have a question or comment for LSAT Demon Daily, just email daily@lsatdemon.com. Thanks for listening.